A young boy standing against the backdrop of the sunset was surrounded by incomprehensible flying monsters approaching him from all directions. Then he looked at the table with the characteristics of the level increased, which could not but please him. A group of heroes bravely fighting hordes of monsters asked not to let the newcomers go to the other world before them, so that the sacrifice would not be in vain. Our hero fought with monsters without sparing himself. He fearlessly rushed right into the thick of things, destroying all. The rest of the spectators only opened their mouths and watched with astonished faces, as they couldn't believe that a newcomer could do such a thing. Looking at them sadly, the guy said that he was really a newbie but had been stuck in this bottom for 3,000 years and couldn't get out. Meanwhile, the monsters kept coming. They were flying out of black holes in the sky, so many that it was impossible to count them. The lad had studied hard and studied surgery. He was sitting now beside the bed with the girl tightly by her arm. During this time, he even learned how to skillfully fly a military airplane like a true professional pilot. He studied hacker program writing thoroughly and became just about the best programmer of his kind. He trained in a variety of surgeries, performed the most complex operations, gaining experience, and had plenty of time. In addition, even became a professional player of chess and checkers and other board games, getting much stronger. At the same time, the heroes diligently continued to fight against the monsters attacking the city from all sides like real locusts. The guy even helped one of the heroines get away from a monster attack. The girl wondered why he was helping her. Then to his regret, the guy got a treacherous stab in the back. Over the years he learned a lot and gained experience. The battle intensified as the fighter overcame the obstacle, destroying monsters one by one like an experienced fighter who had been in hundreds of battles. In addition, he lost his comrades who he still couldn't save no matter how hard he tried. The guy held the lifeless body of the girl in his hands. And so the day closed again. He woke up in his bed at the sound of the alarm clock on the calendar. Was the 12th of November, 2065, and now the circle is closed again. Heroes again rushed forward to meet the monstrous monsters staying in the city. At that very moment, the boy thought that he would lead everyone to the destruction of the shadow and give this city its long-awaited freedom. The brave little girl, Tao Tao, tried to fight with one of the monsters pouncing on her. But the forces were not equal. Thank God, swordswoman Lu Shuiyi came to her rescue and split the monster in two with her huge sword. On the connection came out fighter Anya's frightened voice. She said that the monsters are more than they thought. Forces are not equal, need to retreat. Soldier Zhao Haishan gasped and said that it looked like his wish to live to retirement was not destined to come true. They would die right here. And then there was our hero, a guy named Lu Feng. He literally came out of nowhere and hovered in the air behind everyone. As soon as the swordswoman saw the newcomer, she immediately told him to get out of here. He can't handle these monsters alone. A huge monster several stories high was already approaching the defenseless people standing on the ground. Lu turned to the little sorceress and told her to finally take down this monster because it would destroy everyone here. The girl tensed her whole body and concentrated all the power she had for a powerful spell. They did not have time. The monster grabbed the swordswoman with a huge paw and already brought her to his disgusting pace. The girl had already resigned herself to her fate. Fortunately, the newcomer came in time. He separated the monster's arm with a powerful sword strike and freed his friend who had fallen to the ground. Seeing the girl, he held her tightly against him. The swordswoman couldn't believe her happiness yet and was breathing heavily. Her blade was spinning like a whirlwind as it approached the monster's neck. One more second and the monster would go to the other side. All the heroes were startled and opened their eyes in astonishment. Could it be that this newcomer had destroyed a huge monster in almost a second? Could it really be a newcomer? Don't mind Lu ran forward. His level had risen, but there were still plenty of monsters to deal with. Looking at him with surprised eyes, the soldier froze in place. This rookie seems to be crazy, he can't handle them. But pointing to a rusty car standing nearby, Lu said to follow him here. He had some plan. Zhu shouted to the others to keep up with the newcomer. He seems to know what to do. On the girl's face was still clearly frightened. Without too many questions, heroes rushed forward, destroying on the way. Annoying monsters had to get to the destination point. The girl still had the feeling that this stranger knew absolutely everything, but Lu denied it. He didn't want to reveal his cards before the time. Looking up, Zhu noticed that the monsters were flying right at them. What was that nonsense? It felt like they were only aiming at those two. Making a sudden movement, Lu swung his sword. The monster roared in pain and fell to the ground until they were safe. Stopping to catch her breath, Zhu said that she didn't believe him. If it was true, so why was he trying to save them? Luang looked at her thoughtfully. In his head were still fresh memories of how the guy had lost his loved ones unable to save them and now blamed himself for it. Approaching him, Shushu said that she was touched by the stranger's words, but she didn't believe him at all. He must be a master flirt. The little sorceress looked at the stranger and did not understand where he came from and what he was doing here. Without listening to them, the guy ran forward, destroying monsters one by one. The others only had time to look at him. When they stopped near a parking lot, Lu told them to go on their own and not to look back. The little girl looked at the stranger and asked, "Does Big Brother want to leave them?" Approaching the innocent child, Lu said that all of his comrades have gone to the other world many times. They will not part until the rest are intact. Without another word, the guy pushed himself off the ground and flew forward right to the edge of the overpass. He leapt down and flew like an arrow, cutting through the air below. Still had something to do. Lin Yu, being a gunsmith, was shooting everyone with her huge minigun. Monsters flew away from her like toys. The girl clenched her teeth but didn't show any sign of worrying. The monsters kept coming at her no matter how many times she fired, as if it was all useless. She ran out of ammunition and the shooter took out 2 pistols and began to defend herself with her last strength. This was the last line of defense. Eventually, and the pistols emptied, the girl was left defenseless before the horde of monsters. She only had to wait. Luckily, Lu appeared. He jumped off the bridge and, holding his sword on his weight, flew straight down to the monster that was already flying towards the defenseless girl. There was a crackling sound and the flying gargoyle shattered apart under the powerful impact. Everyone was safe. Lin looked at the stranger and asked with trembling lips, "Who is he?" But Lu did not answer and only took her hand. He dragged the girl forward through the horde of monsters, telling her to take the elevator down to the 13th floor, number 1302. Running up to the elevator, the guy pushed her inside and pressed the necessary floor without saying another word. Then he began slaying the monsters one by one with sharp sword swings. There were too many of them, but they couldn't be allowed to break through. The flying lizards were like a horde of insects flying towards the entrance to break in and destroy everything in their path. Running away from countless monsters, Anya asked this guy didn't fool them after all. He said to run and don't look back. On the other hand, they had no other choice. Joe were prepared to fight back, need to trust this strange stranger and do whatever he said. And so they reached their destination and Lu was already waiting for them, the guy pointing his hand forward urging them to keep running. Now he himself will take care of these monsters. By the way, they have already accumulated a decent number of a real horde. The guy's lips slowly moved. He ironically apologized to the monsters and a grenade clicked in his hands. A second later the boys heard a monstrous explosion behind them. The blast wave reached them and nearly fell them to the ground. The monstrous explosion sent the monsters flying in different directions and immediately burst into flames. Back to them, Lu said not to worry. The bomb's range was calculated with incredible accuracy and the monsters were destroyed. The tunnel was closed. Seeing that the others didn't move, the guy irritatedly told them to shut their mouths and move on instead of standing there like statues. After walking a few steps, the guy saw a beautiful night city that was literally on fire. There was a disaster. The invasion of monsters affected everyone. Lifting his head up, Lu said that they would be safe here, worrying about nothing. They could take a break. Turning to the others, he asked if they still believed him or not. Shu said he was good, but she still had doubts and Anya supported her. The little witch Tao came up to him and said that such a time is a very long time. What did he do besides fighting? Lu sighed and replied that he had trained for a lot of things. As Anya approached him, she said that this city is a huge world. Now there must be a lot of awakened people here. He must be one of them. In a frightened voice, Tao asked where the others were. Only 4 of them here. 3 people are missing somewhere. Shu said not to listen to all this nonsense. When he approached her, he put his hand to his heart and bowed, wishing it were true that Zhu was almost falling to the ground. The witch suddenly noticed that the nearest cable car had started moving with itself for some reason. Making a great leap, Lu jumped in and with a final smile repeated that he had said he had learned a lot, hadn't he? After a while, the boss appeared and it was a huge giant with steel wings that looked like a giant robot. The soldiers tried unsuccessfully to stop him with their machine guns, but it was useless. The monster was too strong and well armored to even scratch it in any way. It was destroying literally everyone. The woman leading the soldiers ordered them to retreat immediately or they would all stay here forever. Lu appeared like a thunderclap and crashed to the ground right in front of them, leaving behind a bright beam of energy. The leader looked at the stranger and asked, "What is a rookie of such a low level doing here? He won't be able to cope." But with a final wave of his hand, Lu moved straight towards the monster's huge leg without any regret, saying that he would finish this battle. Seeing the small prey, the giant reached out his steel arm to finally grab the pesky man. The monster's huge fingers had already approached the boy, and he swung his sharp sword and prepared to strike a precise blow. The woman pulling on the dark sunglasses sighed heavily. This poor guy must be the end. He can't handle the monster. But it was not to be. With one precise blow, Feng severed several fingers from the giant robot's hand as if they were branches of a tree. Everyone opened their mouths in amazement at how this was even possible. Who was this guy to possess such power? Suitable Lu muttered to himself that the most vulnerable parts of this monster's body are the pinky and ring finger of the left hand. The monster became enraged. He released several sharp metal tentacles from his back like an octopus and moved forward. The woman couldn't believe her eyes how this newcomer could have such well-developed intuition. Who was he anyway? Lu jumped up and began to strike the monster with circular blows, trying to separate its limbs. Already tired of thinking something, the woman just opened her mouth and watched the strange actions of the newcomer who had appeared so suddenly. And so having made another small jump, Lu was already on the giant's head and preparing his sword for the final blow. The monster opened its mouth. The sharp sword blade went straight into the monster's eye, a crackling sound was heard, and electric sparks spewed out. After such a final blow would no longer be able to get to his feet, Lu jumped down, and the giant slumped on his back. A few seconds later, a monstrous explosion was heard behind the guy's back, but he didn't even turn to look. When the giant was defeated, in front of Lu was a large core glowing to an incredible temperature. This was the heart of the giant. Taking the strange round object in his hands, the guy regretfully thought that the core would disappear, and this time it was somehow pathetic. The others standing on the outskirts of the city saw a bright beam of energy aiming straight for the heavens. The girls pondered on who was this guy if they never see him again. Then the stranger was telling the truth, and he is really in a vicious circle. For all this time, the player has already had time to thoroughly learn everything that happens here. Every time he reaches 6 in the morning, he starts all over again. With sadness in his eyes, he said goodbye to his friends whom he had seen thousands of times and parted thousands of times. And so he woke up again in his room and abruptly got out of bed, breathing heavily. Everything started all over again. He immediately ran to the window and looked out, shouting that he was finally back. It had been endless days filled with battles. And finally they were over. Finally everything fell into place, and exhausted Lu sat down on the bed and lowered his head for a few minutes thinking. His level remained the same, yes, and also the core he got after defeating the boss remained with him. Taking the cold golden object in his hands, the guy looked at it closer. He had already forgotten about this thing, now he could grow it. He was interrupted by the wheelchair-bound sister girl bursting into the room where he had been for so long. She looked at her brother with a stern gaze that seemed to be about to erupt into another scandal the girl was extremely displeased with. Even with all this, Lu jumped out of bed and rushed to his sister, wrapping her in his arms. He whispered, missing her very much. For him it had been a few thousand years. Lu hadn't seen his sister in too long, and now he was hugging her. Pulling away from her brother, the girl asked where he had even been all day. Lu wanted to somehow avoid answering and lied. He said he was at work. Wanting to smooth things over, the guy pulled out his phone and said he'd already gotten his paycheck so he could buy a cake. The girl looked at him with grateful eyes and was glad that she would forgive him once and went to make them dinner. Wanting to play a prank on his sister, the guy asked him for a marble beefsteak, wine, and lobster. The girl yelled that she'd cook what he'd eat. Memories came back to mind as the boy sat beside the bed where his sister was lying, and he didn't care what the doctor said. He vowed to raise her to her feet. The sister's name was Lu Yao. Walked into the room. Feng said that she needed to have surgery, but the girl was skeptical and told him to get out of the kitchen. Her brother only looked at her with a surprised look. As many know, many years ago many spatial rifts happened. The world of shadows is chosen by some people who have begun their adventure in a strange and new world. They were called the Awakened Ones. After opening a bottle of Coke, Lu looked at the TV where the news anchors were talking about a new and unusual event. These were people given special abilities and classes, but they would not escape their own fate ever. According to rumors, this world will disappear and the events will only stop when the shadow world of divine rank is cleaned up. A man who looked like Superman appeared on the TV screen. It was the world's #1 awakened person, and his name was Alston. He was the head of the Ark faction. The man literally shone in the spotlight. He was the strongest awakened in the world, also known as the Guardian of Hope, the last stronghold of humanity. But apparently the guy did not share these thoughts. As soon as he saw the hero, he immediately got angry and crumpled the bottle of Coke. The thing is, in the world where Lu lived, this man was a demon who absorbed the power of the awakened and destroyed everyone, including Lu himself. He was a true demon monster in the flesh with dozens if not hundreds of human lives to his credit. Sitting down on the couch, Lu contemplated avoiding this man until he was strong enough to win. In order to pull it all off, I needed my own guild and sat down at the monitor. Lu began to look for the very people with whom he had passed the monster so recently. He created the guild named Don. Lu realized he had to save his friends to help them survive at all costs. Suddenly his sister appeared and said that dinner was ready and it was time to eat. Lu turned his head in her direction and nodded, even a little scared. The Awakened Help Center was a huge monolithic building that looked more like a futuristic spaceship in the middle of the city. On a huge screen was Alston. He was holding another of his press conferences and many of the Awakened had gathered to hear him speak. Among them was Lu. He wanted to start his own guild and was now standing at the front desk. A woman asked, "Really, does he want to do that?" Two people, a man and a woman, were looking at him with a sidelong glance. This newcomer seemed to be completely crazy. He was too low level to form a guild. A few more people came up to him and started whispering behind the guy's back, but he stubbornly ignored them. Lu looked at the administrator with guilty eyes and said that he didn't have a rank A item, but he had this, and pulled out a huge giant egg from his pocket. As soon as the receptionist saw such an item, she immediately became speechless. Everyone else standing here also became alarmed. Where did this newbie get such an item? Lu asked. To store it in sub-zero temperatures now. Can he continue to register? The woman said that if no one joined the guild within 36 hours the registration would be over, the pledge would also be lost. Thinking about it, the guy realized that he needed to convince the others to join his guild at any cost, even if he had to grovel. The events moved to London, to the Kendo Center, where young warriors dressed in traditional Japanese clothing were training. The battle heated up with renewed vigor as Zhu literally annihilated her opponent with one precise and apt strike. The man flew to the ground. Suddenly she got a text from that guy who was stuck in one day coming out. He was lying after all. The girl cringed. Sitting in her office, Anya was reprimanding one of her employees for botching the purchase of an expensive company. Suddenly the girl was distracted. She received a message. The man standing in front of her bowed and closed his eyes guiltily. On the screen of the smartphone Anya saw that it was a message from the same guy, but she wasn't interested. In the meantime, the military base was loading. One of the combat mech soldiers were trying hard to carefully load the expensive device. Soldier Zhao reached out and continued to command his subordinates to be careful with this technique. He also received a message on his phone and immediately thought it was some kind of spam and declined the offer. A message appeared on Lu's phone from the little witchy witch. She said, "It's not nice to cheat. Why does Big Brother do that?" Well, what else did he expect? Lu realized that he had to take care of the rest of them, but of course that wouldn't be easy. A bunch of people stood and chanted only one phrase, "Big Sister," with bright smiles on their faces. The thing is that a girl with blue hair stepped on the chest of one of the guys with machine guns and took his phone out of his pocket. Her name was Charlotte. Looked down at her opponent and asked what was so cool about these mercenaries that everyone was afraid of them. She looked at the man even more closely and said that her friends might be small-minded, but she would not allow them to be hurt. Seeing a curse, the man pulled out his assault rifle and started shooting directly at the defenseless girl. But as we know, Charlotte was not so simple. She put her arm forward and in one motion stopped all the bullets flying at her. A strong gust of wind threw the man far backwards. The mercenary had not expected this and did not even have time to stand on his feet. Then, holding the enemy's weight, the girl said that her men had not taken the goods and that if the mercenaries came at them again, she would destroy them. The comrades standing behind them came to delight. Their big sister was indeed invincible. Mercenaries, dust compared to her. Turning to her friends, Charlotte smiled and said good-naturedly that they had gotten into some kind of trouble again. And then she turned around and saw a strange guy behind her. It was Lu. He said, "What is the one inviting her to his new guild?" Running up to him, Charlotte cocked an eyebrow in surprise. She was a bit crazy herself, but never thought there would be a level 9 rookie like her. The two men immediately began to approach the guy, crunching their knuckles and ready to level him to the ground. Deciding to show them his power, the guy just swung his fist, creating an incredibly powerful stream of wind that blew everyone away in a second. Now Charlotte's facial expression changed. Her gum bubble burst and the girl opened her mouth in surprise. Why is this rookie's basic skill so strong? Lu looked at her and said that if you hit 1,000,000 times, you can't even achieve that. The girl started to get nervous. She applied her skill and everything around her started to rise into the air. This guy is weird. So let him not approach her. Of course, Lu wasn't so simple. The guy ran straight at her, passing every obstacle in his path as if he were flying through the air. He drew a dagger and held it to Charlotte's throat, freezing her in place. Realizing that she had lost, Charlotte stopped. It wasn't fair to sneak up on her from the sidelines the way only rats do. With a wave of her hand, Lu then suggested she have a little telekinesis competition if that was her forte. The essence of the competition was that with the help of this skill, you had to knock down as many bottles that were placed everywhere. Charlotte had prepared herself and gathered all her strength together, and her comrades were here too when supporting their big sister. A second later, there was a pop and several bottles flew into the air as if they were toys. The girl's strength was amazing. The men standing next to him were delighted. This newcomer can't even move 2 bottles, so victory is in their pocket. Inflating the bubblegum bubble again, Charlotte asked what this guy was worth. Let him show off all he could do, or was he scared? But Lu didn't think of backing down. He tensed to the limit and opened his eyes. Tentacles of invisible energy immediately began to burst out from his back. All the bottles were hit in a second. The others' jaws dropped as this stranger destroyed all the bottles in one blow just by some colossal power. How could it be possible? The gum bubble burst in Charlotte's mouth again. She couldn't believe how a beginner of this level could have such a strong skill. But on the other hand, the girl smiled and said that from now on she was his subordinate and let him teach her these blows. A smile appeared on Lu's face. Of course, he will teach her everything he knows and make Charlotte a queen. Bringing the others to their destination, the guy waved his hand and welcomed them to the Dawn Guild. Here was his apartment. Walking a few floors up, Lu quietly opened the door and peeked into the room. He called out to his sister. But unfortunately, the room was empty and Lu couldn't see where she had gone, but there was a note on the table. Taking the piece of paper in his hands, the guy read the message that said Yao had gone to help the others. Lu sighed. She was growing up too fast. The guy sat down to eat a little snack, but no sooner had he picked up the food with his chopsticks than a text message immediately arrived on his phone. Taking the device in hand, the player read, and it seems one of the contestants agreed it was the armorers. She worked in a cafe as a waitress in real life and was wearing a maid's dress. Sitting on his couch, Lu realized that he wasn't going to let this girl discount somewhere out there in the depths of the dark world and would definitely save her. But there was another problem. Only 2 had joined him, and there were only 4 hours left. Thinking about it, he realized who the third would be. On a rainy street, 3 scumbags were beating up a poor guy lying curled up on the earth. Punches were raining down on him, and the unfortunate man just tried to defend himself by covering his face with his hands. One of the hooligans kept beating the poor guy and calling him all the words he knew. After all, this guy put up with everything even though he was robbed. One of these thugs offered to sell this guy and make good money. They're out of their minds. The unfortunate man's name was Li Shijun, and he too was awakened in his case. Something started to happen. The guy fiercely resisted. But it was too late. A huge fox burst out of his body, his eyes lit up red like a demon's, and the pet immediately began to attack. One by one the bullies fell into a dark abyss, where only endless darkness of misery and fear awaited them. The rest of those who were lucky enough to escape were running headlong somewhere very far away, trying to hide somewhere from this monster. Wolf looked at them with his burning eyes and saw the 2 running straight into the nearest mall. The monster rushed forward and broke the glass door and burst inside, scaring away all the visitors inside, and chaos began to reign. The fox didn't touch anyone and punched through the building and came out the other side, continuing to chase after the rest of the hooligans. The frightened Li was still lying on the wet asphalt curled up in a lump. He didn't know what to do. The guy didn't control himself. Meanwhile, his demonic pet was rampaging through the streets of the city. He was throwing cars around, breaking a building and scaring people. People looked around in horror at what was happening. They couldn't understand what was going on. Everyone was afraid to even approach this monster. Lu, who had approached them, saw the huge monster perfectly, and had already prepared his sword to destroy it. Looking down on him, the guy had already taken aim. He found the third, who would become a member of his new guild. A girl standing nearby saw the stranger and said that a professional came to help, but her boyfriend said it was just a regular rookie. As it turned out, this newcomer was not so simple. He blocked the black fox's huge paw with both hands. Then bouncing back, he ran straight towards the defenseless kid, luring the huge monster behind him. The hero ran down the street and was chased by a huge fox with burning eyes. He was ready to devour anyone in his path. With a trembling voice, the frightened Li shouted to the stranger to run away. This leaf could destroy him. After running a few more meters, Lu grabbed the kid and ran further with him. Then the boy put the boy's body forward, and the fox put his black, weighty paw on it. Something strange began to happen. Li felt his body overflowing with energy. The fox was dissolving and entering through his skin like smoke. Soon the monster vaporized the boy, completely absorbed his pet, and now the city was safe, though a little destroyed. Breathing heavily, the boy said she recognized him. But Lu replied that it wasn't, so the point is that this kid is the nightmare beast. Turning his head to the stranger, Lee was startled. He didn't expect to hear such a thing and certainly didn't want to believe he was the nightmare beast. The thing was that this kid, being a level 1 rookie with no class, was able to summon this monster, and now it was bursting out of his body. He is not an ordinary man, but an awakened man who appears once per tens of thousands of people. Lee froze in place and could not believe what he heard. When he heard that one day he would be able to destroy an entire city, Lee became cold with fear. He did not want to believe that he was such a monster. But getting closer to him, Lu stroked his head, trying to calm him down. This stranger suspiciously knew a lot about the kid. When Lee looked at him, how this man even knew all this, the boy was stunned for a second. Taking the guy's hand, Lu explained he and the guy were friends, having gone through countless different obstacles together. Soon a multitude of heroes were standing in front of the portal, soon to be the opening of the shadow world of rank D, but they were still missing 2 people. A portrait of Lu the instructor popped up in front of the bald male instructor and took a closer look at the guy. Soon the guy himself, along with Charlotte, approached the 2 of them, wanting to join them. Baldy looked at them with the surprise of a rookie of only level 9. It's fine, of course, but he's too weak. Standing nearby, Charlotte said he was her boss. So if the guy doesn't go, she stays too. The girl continued to inflate her bubble. It was a strange thing for a high-level awakened man to view a newcomer as his boss, the first time the man had ever encountered such a thing. Well, never mind, the man spread his hands and said that with the 2 of them, all Stala was already busy. So let them get ready to sail. The portal began to vibrate. They would soon depart. Everyone else was fully prepared for battle. Charlotte looked at her boss and asked, "Does the kid still have to join them?" But the kid said he had extra classes. The girl wondered if there were still people who went to extra classes. It was so boring and time-consuming. The girl looked at him again and asked why he had invited them. Lu replied that a disaster was about to happen and only they could prevent it. It was still unclear to Charlotte how he could protect the world and his entire team with level 9. But Lu preferred to keep silent. Soon there was going to be a departure and people were already starting to enter the portal one by one. Baldy came out first on the other side and immediately started looking around. This place was unfamiliar to him. They found themselves on the top of a snowy mountain and it was cold everywhere. It immediately felt cold. She had light clothes and didn't expect to have to flounder in the snow, so she immediately started to reflect. Several silhouettes of pros began to advance deep into the snowy mountains everywhere. Only their conversations and the crunch of snow could be heard. Bald asked if there was anyone else in this world. The girl standing next to him said that she doubted that this world must have been empty and almost without resources. Another girl walking nearby saw a beautiful butterfly and put her finger up close. As soon as the insect landed on my hand, the skin immediately began to cover and soon my whole hand was frozen. Then a cracking sound was heard and the frozen arm just broke into several pieces. The girl bent in a fit of pain. The mages began to destroy the insects that were eager to fly up to them and freeze them. The bald man warned that these butterflies are very dangerous, so let the rest of us be careful. But the flying insects had already gathered in great numbers and the whole swarm was heading straight for the defenseless travelers. People began to run away in fear. Some tried and some just fell defenselessly to the ground. A multitude of people immediately began to freeze, instantly transforming into ice. Ladies' screams were immediately silenced. The instructor immediately yelled for everyone to leave this area immediately or they would all freeze here and stay forever. As he continued to run away, the man thought about the level 9 rookie. It was a pity that he was probably already on the other side of the world with such an ability. Charlotte wondered why they weren't leaving, but then she guessed that maybe there was treasure here and she would be the only one to get it. But learning that her boss was going to use these little creatures for training, the girl was horrified. He went crazy. But Lu was completely calm and said that to attack one could only use a blast of mental power directed at one butterfly at a time. Following that, the guy began to concentrate his magical energy in preparation for the strike and several points of light appeared next to him. Hundreds of energy beams burst out of his hands in the same second and began to destroy the butterflies in a matter of seconds. Charlotte opened her mouth in amazement. If she hadn't seen it all with her own eyes, she would never have believed it was possible. Small explosions were heard all around. Lu advised Charlotte to concentrate to compress her energy to the right size. He was giving instructions on how to properly hit, and Charlotte was concentrating on creating a ball of light. A second later, an arrow of blue energy erupted from her finger and went straight at one of the butterflies, piercing several at once. In a calm voice, Lu said that for the first stage 2,000 butterflies should be destroyed. Charlotte opened her mouth in amazement. Yes, he has gone completely crazy. Not wanting to talk anymore, the lad hopped up on the top branch and said he would rest here for now and Charlotte would let Charlotte do the work. After telling her not to slack off and to train properly, Lu laid down on a branch and immediately his snoring was heard. Standing in the cold snow, Charlotte asked for the bullying to stop. It's a real sacrilege. How can you do that? Moreover, there was a whole flock of butterflies in front of her and she doubted if she would really be able to destroy them all. The only true solution was to turn around and run away from here. She wanted to go home anywhere but here. While poor thing was running away from a flock of ice butterflies, Lu was sleeping on a branch and didn't even know what was going on. Eventually seeing that her friend was not feeling well, the guy dropped the purple-colored magic potion from his hands and said to drink it. A tired Charlotte accepted the gift and looked at the vial of liquid with some disbelief. But there was no other option left, so the girl decided to drink all the contents in one gulp, which turned out to taste disgusting. In the end it turned out to be an invisibility potion. The girl stopped seeing her own limbs. Now she was safe. But lying on the branch, Lu said it wasn't that it was just a potion that hides body heat and now the butterfly can't see it. Charlotte looked at the boss with some disbelief and said that if he already had this potion, he knew everything well in advance, didn't he? An unawakened person cannot know ahead of time what will happen beyond the gate, so how does he know? In a tired voice, Lu said that if Charlotte also had to live in the same place for thousands of years, she would learn it perfectly well, too. But the girl didn't seem to believe it all and just put her hand forward and started concentrating Manu. With the boss constantly prodding and correcting her, Charlotte tried to restrain herself. She was getting annoyed. The rest of the poor souls who were lucky enough to escape now lay like frozen statues in the cold snow. Now they will stay here forever. The few lucky survivors were now standing there breathing heavily. They couldn't believe it was so dangerous in this world. But no sooner had the rest rested properly as suddenly on them began to move horrible monsters similar to large mantas. Baldy shouted again for everyone to get ready. Immediately, now another hard fight awaited them. People started to defend themselves from all their strength. But why are these monsters so big and where did they even come from? The insect began destroying people by the dozens. They were so huge they grabbed several at once with one hand. In addition, there was no end to these giant praying mantises and defeating them seemed like an impossible task. Following that, another huge elite-level Ripper monster appeared in front of the bald man. Now no one had a chance to win. Meanwhile, Charlotte had safely completed the task. She was able to destroy the required number of insects. Looking at the branch, where the boss should have been lying, the girl didn't notice anything there was empty. Could it be that he had escaped? Poor Charlotte exhaled heavily. She knew she would and she wanted to brag about her accomplishments to him. A few kilometers away, the surviving humans were trying to destroy the monsters with furious efforts. The girl with pink hair began to cry from fear. She thought she would never get out of here again, so many of these monsters were there. But their trainer gathered all his strength together and rushed at one of the monsters swinging a long sword. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed and with one deft stroke of his claw gave the man the final blow. Unfortunately, the last protector has gone to the other world and the unfortunate girl is left all alone surrounded by these monsters. The monster's sharp claw was already closing in on her. Poor thing covered her mouth to keep from screaming and had already resigned herself to it. But suddenly Lu appeared in front of her and with a deft kick of the ball he separated the monster's claw with a crack and the roar of the insect was heard. In just a fraction of a second, by making a quick dash, the guy destroyed several monsters at once, turning them into pieces of flesh. Already resigned, the girl looked with tearful eyes at the stranger who had saved her. There was only one final monster left, much bigger than all the others. Lu stopped and exhaled. The girl still continued to kneel. All that was left was to send the last insects to the other side of the world. Lu grouped himself and concentrated maximum force in his hand, throwing out his sword. Soon the head of the huge mutant was already lying on the cold snow. Lu walked over to it and took it by the tendrils, dragging it towards him. After walking a few dozen steps they found themselves near the abyss. Lu continued to hold the monster's head in his hands and told the girl not to worry. After a second the fighter unclenched his fingers and released a part of the monster's body right into the deep pit. A girl standing next to him asked what he was doing a little while later. Lu replied that it was just bait for someone bigger. From the depths of the cave there was a crackling sound as if someone was dwelling there, and several long bodies emerged from the darkness. One of the huge millipedes began to crawl up the sheer cliff above, making a nasty clicking sound. The girl's eyes rounded. She couldn't believe her eyes. The stranger had actually lured out the final monster. How was this even possible? Lou just kept looking. He said, "There's actually two of them. Let him take a closer look." In the next second the ice broke and another millipede burst out of there, and the guy managed to bounce aside at the last moment. The monsters were colossal in size. Because there were two of them here. There was a roar and a crackling sound. The insects were covered in ice like everything else here. Goosebumps ran down the girl's back, and she had no idea what to do in such a situation. Ignoring her consternation, Lou rushed forward. The girl asked, "What does he want to do alone against these monsters?" Opening its wide mouth with many teeth, the millipede with a roar rushed straight at the defenseless guy and wanted to devour him. A second later, several hundred sharp ice shards flew out of its mouth and flew straight at Lou. A second later and he was finished. But the guy wasn't so simple with one sword strike. He shattered some shards and tried to move away. Jumping from side to side like a dancer, Lou was moving away from each blow. His movements were incredibly light and smooth. Pushing off the ground once more, he was on the monster's head in a second. The millipede didn't realize it right away. Gritting her teeth, she tried to shake the annoying guy off her head, but it was no use. Lou held on tight. The frightened girl simply watched the strange newcomer challenged by such a monster with an unbroken gaze. Meanwhile, the guy prepared a sword to destroy the annoying monster with one blow. A cracking sound was heard as a sharp blade entered the millipede's shell and reached the internal organs. The monster roared in pain but couldn't do anything flexible enough to throw the guy off his head. Then jumping onto the second millipede, Lou did the same thing. He destroyed the monsters one by one. They were moving straight towards the cliff. After a few seconds, both monsters fell straight down. Lou, who was sitting on one of them, didn't even think of stepping aside. He held onto his sword, which began to move slowly, splitting the much stalk into two pieces. Soon the monster's head separated from its body and one of the monsters fell to the ground with a rumble, letting out its last breath. The second monster suffered the same fate, and soon they were both on the other side of the world. Lou stood on the body of one of the monsters and looked forward triumphantly. The girl could not believe her eyes. She thought that this newcomer would fail and soon go to the other world, but he was not so simple. Charlotte, who had been busy destroying butterflies all this time, saw that the insects were dissolving themselves very quickly. Soon only the three of them left the portal alive, and well after the task was completed. The rest of them remained there forever. The people who were waiting for the others on the other side of the portal opened their mouths in surprise at the fact that only 3 people had survived. Charlotte continued to freak out. She was annoyed that she didn't get to finish the task. Lou calmed her down by telling her she passed anyway. The excited girl asked where they were going now, waving her hand. Lou said he'd take a couple days off, got to get cleaned up. Meanwhile in Anya's office, her subordinate was shuffling from foot to foot again, seemingly fired for poor performance. Hearing the threat in his words, Madam President began to get angry. Is this bastard threatening her? She turned to her subordinate and said she knew how much money this man had laundered. It was cosmic. The man's face immediately changed, and he realized that he had fallen into a trap and tried to justify himself with his last strength, saying that he had made a mistake. Anya softened a little. She said that perhaps she could forgive him, moreover secure him a place in a nursing home. The subordinate bowed. He walked briskly out of the office, trying not to notice another girl coming inside. The employee said that the guy who kept insisting that he was a comrade of the president had not calmed down in any way, should call the police. The president shook her head. The subordinate left the room, carefully closing the door behind her, so as not to annoy the already angry Madam President. Walking over to the window, Anya held a cup of hot coffee in her hand and looked down at the city. There she saw the same strange guy who kept texting her. The stranger was waving his hand and trying to get her attention. He texted her again and said he could see her in the window. Anya tried every method to get away from him so he would finally back off. The girl's cheeks flushed when she saw that he suspiciously knew a lot about her preference for some kind of pervert. Eventually she got sick of it, and Lou saw a sign in front of him that he had been added to the blacklist and now he couldn't write to her. All the others also scattered to all corners of the world. Lou didn't know what to do, had to fly all over the planet and collect them. 4 people walked along the wide road. There was no one else here. The desolate landscape was depressing. Princess Lin Yu looked at the plaque. She was only a nominal member of the team. She needed to join the official guild events. In a calm voice, Lu said that he had already posted the high-ranking assignments she wanted on the darknet according to the rules she was obligated to go. And yes, of course he brought all of them here for training. Lu looked at his comrades with a serious look. Well, here they came. The guy stopped in front of a large complex that looked like a military base with armored doors in front of them. Lee cracked his eyes open in surprise. Why take this brought them to the military base? Are they really going to train here? Walking beside Charlotte asked if there shouldn't be 7 of them. So where are the other 4? Lu replied that they must be on their way. It was time to go in. The guy was the first to move forward to the entrance. The others followed him. Entering inside, Li Shu began to turn his head in different directions. There were no people here at all. Somehow it even looked strange. Squinting his eyes, Lu said it's all about hacking into the main surveillance system and making sure the place was empty. He got clever and sent out a fake warning about a gas leak at a military facility, so the place will be empty for about 2 weeks. Charlotte's eyes lit up with delight at her boss turning out to be a super hacker. Now she's pretty sure he wasn't lying then. The guy just waved his hand. He had said many times before that he was stuck here and if he didn't do something to waste time he would go crazy. Squinting his hand on the fingerprint scanner, Lu unlocked the door. There was a creak and the huge door slid open. Entering inside, the guy saw a huge military complex equipped with the most advanced technologies. In addition, Lu explained that this room is also used to train astronauts, for Charlotte wondered if they were going into space. Walking up to one of the control panels, Lu said that she is a very overthinking guy just wanting to use the place for training. In an annoyed voice, Lin said she didn't need astronaut training. She didn't want to waste her time on it. But when she failed her first attempt, she begged for another chance and she could survive. The guy looked at her with a tired look. The ship she was flying on had just blown to pieces, so it would take time to coordinate. In response to Lin's surprised question, the guy replied that he had only coordinated the code so that he could now make changes to the program. He has spent several decades to learn the technology of spaceship development. Now you can say he is a pro. Charlotte soon came out of the capsule. She was just thrilled. This simulation is just great. Lu replied that he didn't bring them here to play. The girl looked at him with a guilty look and agreed. Then she asked if Li Shu Kid looked bad. Even in spite of the overload, the little guy held firm and did not want to stop the ordeal. Looking up, Lu said close the door as he's starting the round. So let him get ready. He needs to give it his best shot. Charlotte applied Li's attack mode, Li's survival mode, and Li's shy both modes at the same time. The guy wanted to test his abilities. In a quiet voice, Lu said he was running a simulation. So everybody stand by. All participants showed with all their appearance that they were ready to do everything that was required of them and even more. Charlotte was still holding on, but Lin had fallen out of the capsule. Li Shu was an amazingly resilient boy. Even though it was difficult, he held on. Lu appeared in front of his eyes and told the guy to remember to breathe. After all, this mode puts a lot of strain on the body. Li Shu heavily sighed and nodded his head in agreement. The guy concentrated even harder. Soon everyone was almost out of energy. Charlotte was lying on the ground and breathing heavily. Li Shu threw up somewhere off to the side. Poor boy was overexerting himself. To everyone's dismay, Lu wasn't even going to stop practicing if they were done, then let them get up and climb back in. The guys looked at their boss with surprised and frightened eyes. Li Shu said he would try very hard, and Charlotte was horrified. A smile appeared on the guy's face. If compared to the demonic level darkness world, he is still generous. Soon all 3 were placed in capsules with liquid for antibiotics. They tried there. For almost a week in these capsules, it was possible to recover. The first to come out was Linyu, who got dressed and sighed heavily but felt much better. Immediately Lu Feng appeared and praised her for recovering very quickly. Need to check the results. They arrived at the battle arena, and Lin was already ready for a new battle. The girl was all emotionless. The report ended, and Lu's finger pressed the start button with himself needed to test the girl's skill. As soon as he pressed the button, dozens of mechanical beasts appeared from somewhere and immediately rushed forward. This time Lin swore that she would do it. The girl's eyes glistened. She wouldn't back down for anything. Taking out of her pocket 2 machine gun pistols, she began to spin around destroying monsters one by one. The girl only warmed up. And this turned out to be fun. She seemed to enjoy firearms so much as battling dozens of monsters. At some point, the mechanical beasts became twice as fast, and the girl was already having a bit of a hard time coping. She jumped up and took aim with 2 barrels at once. The monsters ran up to her from below and were ready to rush in to attack. Spinning like a whirlwind, Lin began firing from 2 barrels. Explosions began to erupt everywhere as monsters exploded one after another. Upon landing, the girl exhaled heavily and the remains of the mechanical monsters fell beside her. The results were not bad at all. Almost half of all indicators increased, but there is still room to grow. Charlotte came down to them like a balloon girl said she was getting used to the lack of gravity. This was the next test for the telekinesis girl had to control the heavy balls. Looking at the subordinate, Lou said that 6 pieces was too little for her to try all of them at once. As soon as Charlotte heard this, she was covered with goosebumps of fear. Her boss seems to have gone completely crazy. 4 dozen balls of enormous size appeared at once. Charlotte felt that she could no longer stand, it was too hard. Continuing to look at her with a serious look, the boss told her to concentrate all her power and unleash it at once. The girl tensed up and energy literally began to ooze out of her body. She screamed from the strain, but still she managed. Charlotte looked up at her boss and smiled, her cheeks flushed with joy. She couldn't believe it. As Lou continued to stare at her, he thought that he didn't expect anything else from her since she was the future queen of telekinesis. A huge black fox was leaping across the platforms. The monster dodged flying bombs with incredible ease. Sitting beside him, Li Shi folded his hands like a prayer and controlled his pet from afar. Everything was almost perfect. But the fox jumped on the bomb nearby and now it could not stop flying. The boy looked at the pet with horror and tried to stop it, but nothing happened. Next a gunshot rang out and the ghost monster's exhausted body collapsed on one of the platforms. This was the end. The unfortunate boy sat down on the ground and lowered his head. He was just useless and felt most horrible. Lou came out from behind his podium and praised his comrade. On the contrary, he could control the beast for 3 minutes, whereas before he couldn't even last a few seconds. Li still was inconsolable. He almost cried it would still not be enough. Lou urged him to calm down. This was just the beginning. He is learning. Practice was over. The whole team stood in assembly. Lou thanked them for their effort, and now they could rest. Charlotte jumped up on the spot finally. She would finally be able to fight real people. Lin didn't seem to be particularly satisfied, and Li Shi was still breathing heavily. In 3 days they will all be teleported to a catastrophic level world. The report goes 72 hours left. And so the guy was already in his bed and sleeping peacefully, needed to want a little rest after what was happening. Was early morning. Lou picked up the suddenly ringing phone and greeted the person he was talking to with a sleepy voice. He really didn't want to wake up right now. His sister's voice boomed like thunder, and the guy immediately woke up. Yao yelled that she would never ask to fill in for her at work again. The uncomprehending Lou asked what had actually happened. He was just working as before. But the thing was that my brother was a little overdoing it. Not only did he fix all the equipment, but he also took on other people's cars. So not only did he take on an advanced exoskeleton, not even acupuncture clients. What kind of person is this? The guy finally realized what he was talking about and laughed. He just had nothing to do and decided to occupy himself. The sister continued to resent Lou. Guilty said he just wanted to make her job easier, but there were already short beeps on the phone. He sighed heavily and stretched. He should have thanked her for having such a kind and capable brother instead of the usual. Seeing the timer, Lou realized that there are only 2 days left and you need to gain so much experience, yes, and in general things to do, so it's time to get up. The next location was the empty city of World of Shadows Rank C. The huge red moon towered over the empty castle. Now they were together with Tao. The girl was holding a laptop together. Lou asked wasn't she wondering how he knew all this. He looked out from behind a nearby bush and saw several people dressed in strange clothes heading towards them. Well then, it was time to start. A layer of protective energy formed around the guy and he moved forward. It was zombies with red. Lou only had a few seconds to destroy all the monsters at once. But it was not all. In front of the guy formed a huge monster similar to a large wolf, but for some reason he walked on his hind legs. Tao was horrified at the sight of the monster. It was a werewolf, but where did it come from? The girl almost screamed. The wolf rushed straight forward. Lou had already prepared his 2 swords and ran straight towards him. It was like an easy walk. Swinging his sword he applied an icy strike. The monster roared as soon as it felt the cold near its neck. The werewolves were getting bigger and bigger, and there were already several of them. Lou said that he needed to strengthen the silver attack and divine blessing. Several werewolves were already closing in on him, mouths wide and teeth snapping, and the danger was near. The frightened girl still gave him a reinforcement asking if he could handle it. Lu only waved it off for him. It was a real trifle, so there was nothing to be afraid of. The guy had sent several werewolves to the other side of the world in just one go, and there was a crunching and squealing sound. Lu moved with such speed that it was impossible to follow him with an ordinary eye, only a bright light stretched out behind the guy. Sitting behind one of the big bushes, Tao was angry because her boss had only taken her to clean up the place, not to help her with her homework. Sighing heavily, Lu objected, yes, she will help him, but he genuinely wants to help her with her homework, so let her ask. Staring at the laptop screen, the girl started quoting the problem. It was quite complicated, and Tao asked her to solve it. Continuing to exterminate the monsters, Lu laughed. This is such a simple task, so let her try to solve it herself, no need to rely on others. After this, Tao became furious. This guy brazen liar cheated her. Even the laptop flew out of the little girl's little hands. Then he asked again to upgrade the reinforcement. Tao grumbled. He had destroyed all the monsters. After all, why waste mana on her? Lu explained that they were moving to the next part of the castle. The little one constantly grumbled he was using her as a toy. But without listening to her, Lu moved forward, and Tao ran after him, barely able to keep up with her little legs. Soon the boys had arrived at the place below. There were a lot of strange people dressed in balaclavas as if they were mages. They were high-level magic skeletons. Tao was even slightly scared they would actually be able to handle them, but Lu was confident. Hearing what level these monsters are, the girl was furious. They're going to be here for a week. Lu replied that they only have 24 hours. Tao's face changed, and she tensed up. They wouldn't be able to do it all in the allotted time. Without further question, the guy rushed forward, and Tao continued to solve the problem. Lu still agreed to help her. In the heat of battle, he kept getting distracted to help the little girl with her homework. One of the skeletons used his vast spell, raising his staff. Upwards purple-colored lightning bolts began to flash everywhere. But for our hero, as you can imagine, it was no problem. Lu was moving so fast that for him it was like going for a morning jog. Swinging his sword, he sped up and began mowing down the monsters one by one, heading into their large cluster. Sitting on top of Tao holding her laptop and sad she knew this guy was lying to her again. But after she saw that on one of the rocks was scrawled the solution to the problem with the ball, she opened her eyes in surprise. Soon, all the skeletons departed to the other world. Lu stood in front, and as if waiting for something, his level rose even more. When the girl heard that they will change the location, she was immediately surprised by the remaining only boss. But even so, it is not enough. Jumping up, Lu said he had his own method, so there's nothing to worry about. Better let him and give reinforcement. Realizing that she was being used as a servant again, Tao turned away and snorted under her breath, feeling unbearably resentful. All the way to the next location, the guy was diligently trying to help her with her homework. Tao was even surprised. Crouching on one knee, Lu leaned over to her and gestured for her to be quiet because the boss was coming. Heavy hoofbeats and horse neighing could be heard everywhere, and someone was approaching them with great speed. It was a rider. He sat on a great ghostly horse. From their eyes and mouths came flames, and the rider had no head. Hiding behind a large rock, Lu pinned the girl down and ordered her to be quiet. It was the legendary Headless Horseman on a black horse. After casting all the necessary spells on Lu, the girl hit again and Lu moved forward. This time it was mid-level reinforcement, so the sorceress was quite tired, but Lu stroked her head and praised her for a good job. He moved forward and the assistant said he's a liar, so she doesn't believe him, but still let him be careful. The headless rider was truly terrifying. The horse reared up and roared loudly, and in the rider's hands was a huge axe. With fast and long leaps, Lu approached him. He was already preparing his sword to finish off this boss in one blow. But it wasn't that simple. A shield suddenly formed around the rider and the sword only bounced off the hard surface. Tao, who was watching, trembled with fear as she saw that the attacks were ineffective. Her eyes widened with fear. The girl no longer believed they could defeat such an opponent. At the same time, Lu seemed to be mocking his rival. He laughed. Tao watched this and became horrified. He was trying to anger the monster. The rider's convenient voice rang out, and he called Lu a nasty insect and lunged straight at him. Fury overwhelmed the rider. Hitting the ground with his axe, he launched a huge energy wave at the boy, but Lu bounced back as if taunting him at the last moment. Tao finally realized that this is just a game and this liar is just arrogant. He's about to get hurt himself. Hearing those words, Lu confirmed that's why he took her along with him, so don't let her show off. Meanwhile, the rider was already running at full speed toward his victim, swinging a heavy axe, but the warrior had a plan. They reached a certain spot, and the rider stuck between the rocks. Now they were safe. The little sorceress ran out into the light. Standing nearby, Lu ordered to quickly use his fire attack on him. Tao slanted her eyes again, he orders her. But still the girl obeyed. A second later, a pillar of fire rained down from the sky on the rider, but the shield worked in time. Sorcerer, I'm even a little offended, but forcing such a little girl to burn her health and then me to attack. Meanwhile, the rider stuck between the rocks continued to defend himself with an invisible wall. The red moon poured more and more strongly. Finally, they finished. Tao was even glad she was already extremely tired of being here and wanted to go home, and even the task didn't seem so difficult. Seeing the helplessness of his opponent, Lu rushed towards him. If he thinks to escape, then this rider is even more naive. Seeing that they didn't succeed, the babe laughed, even leaving her boss may screw up sometimes, but the level was not yet cleared. There was another rider running at them, which was impossible, but the monster was already approaching them with his hooves clattering. Only one charged strike was enough to end it all. Several pillars of light destroyed two knights at once. In the guy's hands were several items, one of which was that huge axe. The knights were vaporized literally before their eyes. And they had a C-rank shield of incredible power, literally indestructible. No weapon in the world can destroy it. Now Lu can use it. After all, he had accumulated necessary level. The guys were moving towards the exit of the dungeon.